Have you ever asked yourself why a man seems more distant right at the moment things start to feel real? It's one of the greatest emotional contradictions in dating. When a man begins to develop genuine feelings, he may instinctively step back, not because he doesn't care, but because he does. Emotional attachment can make him vulnerable, and vulnerability is uncomfortable for someone who isn't used to it. Many men were never taught how to sit with those emotions, so distance becomes their way of processing. You'll see the first sign in what he tries not to show. He might act casual, but something tiny gives him away. He seems more tuned into the details of your mood, what you're doing, or how you react to him. In The Way of the Superior Man, the idea is explored that emotional growth requires confronting discomfort. What you're witnessing is the early stage of that confrontation. Another sign is that he keeps checking in even when he claims to be busy. A simple text, a voice note, or a quick call doesn't seem like much, but it's his way of staying connected without fully stepping forward. He wants proximity without yet knowing how to offer total presence. A man who is hooked also pays attention to what other men around you are doing. He may not admit it, but a subtle change in tone or a protective reaction appears when another guy enters the picture. That reaction isn't about ownership, it's a sign that you've become emotionally significant to him. One of the strongest signs is that you influence his behavior. Maybe he starts treating you with more care, working harder on himself, becoming more intentional in his plans. When a man is thinking about you, you become part of his internal motivation. You exist in his decision making even when he's not speaking to you. Silence becomes a clue too. You feel his absence more than you hear his words. A man who is emotionally unaffected disappears without hesitation. But a man who is hooked disappears and comes back because the connection is tugging at him. His distance is not an exit. It's a pause while he calculates how not to lose something that matters. There's also the accountability shift. He starts considering how his actions might impact you. That mental shift is subtle but undeniable. He is no longer just living for himself. Your presence has become a factor in his choices. That shift alone is more telling than grand gestures. Then there's the moment he opens up even just a little. Maybe he shares something about his past or admits what scares him. That small crack in the emotional armor is huge. For a man who guards his feelings, even one moment of honesty is evidence that you're inside his world more than he lets on. Another powerful indicator is the way he watches you grow. Instead of discouraging you, he feels inspired, maybe challenged, but definitely moved. Men don't analyze their feelings the way women often do. They feel their way through action and reaction. When your personal development pushes him to evolve, you are living in his thoughts. And finally, the biggest sign of all, he returns. Even after distance, silence, or emotional retreat, he comes back with renewed energy. Not because you chased, but because your independence made him see your value more clearly. As Matthew Hussey often explains, love grows when two people feel free, not controlled, not demanded, but genuinely connected. The deeper truth is that you don't need to prove your worth to a man who is hooked. When you hold on to your emotional center, you become the woman who inspires a man to step into his. The distance is not the story, the return is. Distance can sometimes be a sign of emotional overload, not disinterest, and this is one of the most misunderstood realities in modern dating. When a man starts to feel something deeper than attraction, something that affects his heart rather than just his attention, he may not have the emotional skill set to handle what those feelings bring up. Many men have spent years learning how to be logical, controlled, self-reliant, and unshakable, but very little time learning how to sit with vulnerability. A deeper connection requires him to feel exposed, and exposure is not something he is often associated with safety. So when he acts distant, what looks like disconnection is often actually internal processing. He may step back because his emotional system is overwhelmed. The same way someone might step outside after walking into a room that's too warm. The instinct is not rejection, but regulation. He needs a moment to breathe, to understand what he is feeling, and to figure out who he is within this new emotional dynamic. This emotional overload can come from many triggers. It could be that he has never felt this level of affection before, and it disrupts his usual sense of control. It could be that he has been hurt in the past, and the feelings you bring up remind him that emotional risk has consequences. Or it could be that he is aware of the expectations that come with real connection, responsibility, consistency, emotional presence, honesty. These are not small demands, and even a good man may not feel ready to rise to them immediately. In this sense, his distance is often not a turning away from you, but a turning inward toward himself. He is trying to make sense of the unfamiliar language of his own emotions. In the book Attached, there is a concept that people with avoidant tendencies often retreat not because they want freedom, but because closeness triggers their nervous system. Their emotional retreat is their attempt to soothe themselves, and when the feelings settle, they often re-engage. If you take this space personally, you react as if the battle is between you and him. But in reality, the battle is often inside him. You will notice that during this distance, he doesn't fully disconnect, Perhaps he still watches your stories, still sends a small message, still keeps an eye on your life. He may not say much, but he doesn't disappear. That's because his heart hasn't left, his emotions are still activated. His logical mind is trying to apply brakes, but the emotional part of him is still steering. This internal contradiction explains why he might seem hot and cold, present one moment and distant the next. If he didn't care, there would be no fluctuation at all. Indifference is consistent. Emotional overload is inconsistent. The worst thing you can do in this moment is chase him, push him, or try to force clarity too quickly. Pressure amplifies overwhelm. Space allows him to return with intention. When you stay centered, when you remain confident and emotionally grounded, you show him that feelings don't have to be chaotic, that love doesn't have to suffocate. That closeness can be an experience where both people still have room to breathe. Men often pull back when feelings deepen beyond their comfort zone, and this behavior confuses many women because it looks like a backward step at the very moment the connection appears to be moving forward. But a man's emotional comfort zone is not defined by the depth of his feelings. It is defined by his familiarity with those feelings. Many men grow up learning to manage life with logic, independence, and control, not emotional expression or vulnerability. So when a woman begins to matter to him, his internal world reacts in a way that may not look romantic at first glance. Instead of leaning in with honesty, he may instinctively create distance. This distance is not a message of rejection, but often a sign of emotional growth being activated. Feelings that are new, intense, or meaningful can require processing time, and his initial response is not to share the weight, but to carry it alone. You might see him become less communicative, respond with shorter messages, or suddenly seem distracted. Before this shift, everything may have felt natural and easy, as if the relationship were moving effortlessly. But once the emotional stakes rise, his protective instincts may wake up and whisper, "Be careful." Not because he doubts you, but because deeper connection brings the possibility of deeper loss. For many men, attachment is synonymous with responsibility, vulnerability, and the potential for pain. Even if he wants the connection, he may not yet feel equipped to handle everything it demands. Pulling back in his mind is a way to slow things down so his emotional world can catch up to the pace of the relationship. This is something explored in many relationship books, including works that explain how avoidance is a self-protection response, not a lack of affection. He is not trying to shut you out, he is trying to stabilize himself. What makes this moment crucial is how the woman responds. When she reacts with fear, panic, or pressure, it often confirms the exact overwhelm he is experiencing. It makes the feelings feel heavier instead of safer. But when she stays grounded, warm, confident, and self-contained, she communicates something powerful without saying a word. This connection is real, but it doesn't need to consume us. Men often need emotional safety spelled out through experience, not dialogue. If he pulls back and she becomes clingy, he feels more suffocated. If he pulls back and she remains centered, he learns that emotions don't have to drown him. He learns that closeness doesn't always mean losing himself. This moment of distance is also when a man watches a woman more closely than she realizes. He may not be talking, but he is paying attention. He notices whether she continues living her life, keeps her standards, and stays aligned with who she was before feelings got involved. He is looking to see if she will abandon herself in order to hold on to him. If she doesn't, his respect and attraction grow, because he now sees that she is someone who can handle emotional tension without falling apart. That alone can be the shift that encourages him to step forward again, this time with more clarity, intention, and emotional presence, not because she pushed him, but because the space allowed him to meet his own feelings without fear. Consistent small actions reveal more truth than smooth words. And this is one of the most reliable ways to understand how deeply a man is invested, especially when he isn't openly expressing his emotions. Words are easy. Anyone can make promises, claim interest, or say the right thing in a moment of affection or excitement. But real emotional involvement is shown in the tiny footprints he leaves in your daily life. When a man is genuinely connected to you, even if he is distant or unsure of how to verbalize his feelings, his behavior will still betray his inner world. His emotional presence can be seen in the small, consistent ways he shows up. A message sent in the middle of a busy day just to check on you, noticing a detail you mentioned in passing, remembering something important to you without being reminded. These are the signs that he is thinking about you when you're not around. Real interest doesn't happen in grand gestures once a month. It happens in subtle patterns that repeat themselves. This is why emotional maturity often shows up not in what a man says, but in what he follows through on. A man who is hooked cannot stay fully disengaged. He may be cautious, reserved, or even overwhelmed, but he will still make micro attempts to stay connected. In psychological writing, there is a concept that humans reveal themselves through behavioral consistency. What a man does repeatedly tells you more than what he feels in the moment. His words may be casual, but if he listens deeply, checks in regularly, or tries to stay part of your world, his actions are telling a different story. Even the smallest effort shows that you occupy mental and emotional space in his life. These actions also show up when life becomes difficult. A man who is merely attracted might disappear when things get stressful or inconvenient, but a man who is invested, even if confused or distant, will still make room for you. Maybe he doesn't have the emotional vocabulary to say, I'm struggling, but I care about you, so instead he stays present in the ways he can. He keeps you informed, makes small gestures, or shows that he has not forgotten you. It may not be perfect effort, but it is effort. The subtle consistency is more revealing than dramatic declarations because effort requires emotional energy, and people don't spend energy on things that don't matter to them. It is also through small behaviors that you see whether a man is emotionally safe to build with. Anyone can create a romantic moment with a sudden compliment or a passionate conversation, but consistency shows character. It shows whether he is someone who operates through intention rather than impulse. When he remembers your birthday without being reminded, when he follows through on commitments, when he pays attention to how his actions affect you, these are indicators that you live in his internal world. You are not an option that he picks up only when convenient, but someone whose presence he accounts for even in the background of his life. This is why women who stay observant instead of reactive have a powerful advantage. When you pay attention, when you take note of the small daily signals, you stop needing constant reassurance. You begin to understand where he stands based on what he shows, not what you hope. And the truth is, when a man is hooked, his small actions will give him away. Every time a man who is hooked shows signs of emotional investment, even in silence. And this is one of the most subtle but powerful truths in attraction. People often assume that caring must come with big declarations, constant communication, or dramatic romantic gestures. But men, especially those who are not used to sharing emotions openly, often reveal their deepest attachment in the spaces between their words. Silence becomes meaningful not because there is nothing happening, but because something is happening internally. When a man is emotionally invested, he begins thinking, evaluating, questioning himself, replaying conversations, and imagining possibilities. He may not verbalize what he is feeling, but his attention shifts. You become a part of his private world, and that inner shift is often more significant than anything he could say out loud. A man who is indifferent feels nothing in the silence. A man who is hooked feels everything, but doesn't yet know how to express it. In this quiet space, he begins to pay attention in ways he might not openly acknowledge. He watches how you respond when he is distant. He pays attention to your energy, your independence, your emotional stability. He notices whether you demand chase or pressure him, or whether you hold your center with calm self-respect. His silence becomes a way of observing, because men often evaluate compatibility through behavior rather than words. He wants to see how you move when he is not giving you everything. This is not a test in the manipulative sense, but a natural human reaction. Emotional depth requires emotional safety, and he is trying to understand whether you are someone he can be emotionally open with in the long term. Silence also becomes a sign of internal emotional conflict. He may be fighting between desire and fear, vulnerability and self-protection. Maybe he is worried about getting hurt, about losing freedom, about not being good enough, or about not knowing how to communicate his feelings effectively. For men raised to be self-contained, emotional attachment can feel like stepping off a cliff without knowing how to land. So while you may see distance, what he is experiencing is emotional intensity. A man who doesn't care feels calm and unaffected. A man who does care often feels restless, unsettled, and deeply aware of you, so aware that he needs space to balance himself. That is why the silence of an invested man feels different from the silence of a detached one. One feels connected but uncertain. The other feels empty. Even in silence, his life reflects your presence. He thinks before he texts you. He replays something you said. He considers how to approach you without losing control of the situation. He might talk about you to a friend, read relationship advice, or reflect on what he wants. These actions leave no visible trace, but they show that you are not absent from his world. When a man is emotionally hooked, you begin to influence the way he thinks, reacts, and even grows. His decisions start including you, even if he doesn't say it yet. Silence then becomes a phase of emotional alignment. He is not pulling away from you. He is pulling himself together. He is trying to understand and master a feeling that is not yet familiar. And the most compelling part is this: a man whose silence is full of you eventually speaks, returns, or acts with renewed clarity. His silence is not the end of the story. It is the part where his heart catches up with his mind. Your self-respect and emotional independence increase his attraction in ways that go far beyond surface impressions, because they communicate something that every healthy man subconsciously looks for: a woman who chooses him without needing to rely on him for her sense of worth. When a man senses that your happiness, identity, and emotional balance remain intact with or without his constant reassurance, he feels a deep and lasting respect. He realizes he is dealing with a woman who is whole before he arrives, rather than someone hoping he will complete her. This is profoundly attractive because it removes pressure and replaces it with freedom. Love to most men becomes most compelling when it feels like a choice rather than a responsibility forced upon them. Your independence tells him that your world is rich and alive beyond the relationship, and he becomes more motivated to be part of a life that is already beautiful, rather than feeling like he is expected to build one for you. A woman with self-respect doesn't chase, beg for attention, or crumble when a man pulls back momentarily. She may care deeply, but she also understands that affection should never cost her dignity. This sends a powerful message: I want you, but I am not dependent on you. And that message shifts the dynamic. The moment a man senses that you are willing to lose yourself just to keep him, something changes in the attraction. The energy loses its tension. He feels less urgency and less motivation, because part of the mystery and excitement comes from knowing that he is pursuing someone who values herself enough to be selective. Men may enjoy being adored, but they are compelled by a woman who does not abandon herself in the process of loving them. Emotional independence says, I can walk away if I need to, and that possibility is what inspires him to step up. This doesn't mean being cold, detached, or difficult. Emotional independence means you can feel deeply without letting your emotions run your life. You can miss him without chasing. You can care about the relationship without abandoning your standards. You can love from a place of strength rather than fear. A man can sense this in the way you communicate, the way you carry yourself, the way you respond when he is distant or uncertain. If he pulls back and you lose yourself, he reads that as insecurity. If he pulls back and you continue living your life, pursuing your passions, maintaining your emotional equilibrium, he reads that as confidence. And confidence activates pursuit. Suddenly, he is no longer evaluating whether you like him. He is evaluating whether he is good enough to keep you. Men are often inspired by the kind of woman who maintains her individuality in the relationship. When she has goals, friendships, standards, and a life that exists beyond the connection, the relationship becomes an addition, not her entire identity. This is the energy that makes him want to invest more, because he is not just gaining a partner, he is joining a life in progress. A confident man wants a woman who elevates him simply by being in his world, and emotional independence is the foundation of that elevation. It tells him that if he chooses you, it is not out of convenience, fear, or dependency, because the connection is real, mutual, and built from strength rather than need. When you don't chase, you inspire him to step forward on his own, because the space you create allows him to feel his feelings without pressure and to return with clarity rather than obligation. In the early stages of connection, many women feel the urge to pull him closer the moment he steps back. It's a natural emotional instinct. When you feel the bond shifting, your fear wants to grab onto it. But when you lean forward while he is leaning away, the dynamic becomes unbalanced. He feels pushed instead of drawn in, and instead of moving toward you, he often retreats further. When you do the opposite, when you breathe, stay centered and don't try to fill the silence, solve the problem, or chase the connection, you send a powerful message. I trust myself, I trust my worth, and I don't have to control the outcome. That emotional posture changes everything. It gives him the chance to notice your absence, to feel the space, and to reconnect with the desire that originally pulled him toward you. When a man is given freedom rather than pressure, his nervous system relaxes. He can separate his own fears from his genuine attraction. He has room to miss you. Missing someone is essential in deepening a connection, because desire requires contrast. If he is constantly met with pursuit, he never experiences the emotional stretch that reveals how much he cares. Space is not distance. Space is perspective. When you don't chase, he suddenly has the opportunity to ask himself his own questions. Do I care? Do I want her? How much do I want to be in this connection? What am I willing to do to protect or grow it? These questions cannot be answered if you are doing all the emotional labor for him. Pulling back gently, not as a tactic, but as a return to self, allows him to step forward in his own timing. And when a man chooses you from his own desire instead of responding to pressure, the connection becomes stronger, more honest, and more balanced. This is a dynamic explored in literature about attraction and attachment, where the concept is simple: people value what they pursue. Effort deepens emotional investment. When you chase, you rob him of the opportunity to invest. But when you remain still in your strength, he must make a decision, and men grow through decision. This is why a woman who maintains her rhythm, her routines, her standards, her life, rather than collapsing into anxiety, becomes more magnetic. Her energy is not anxious and reaching. It is calm and inviting. She is not waiting for him. She is living. And in that space, he begins to feel the pull of the relationship again. He sees what he could lose. He recognizes the quality of the woman he is connected to. He is reminded that the connection is not guaranteed unless he participates in its maintenance. This is also where self-respect becomes incredibly powerful. When you don't chase, you're not withholding affection. You are simply allowing the natural balance of attraction to play out. You are giving him the agency to choose. And that choice is what makes the connection meaningful to him. A man who returns because he wants to, not because he was pushed to, is a man who comes back with intention, presence, and commitment, not just habit or convenience.